My name is Geoff Raifsnider. I'm a senior mechanical engineer with GFS.
And my name is Jason Garfoot. I'm a senior technical advisor here with GFS.
Today, Jason and I will be covering spray booth equipment and accessories that address worker safety. So not to come here and be all doom and gloom, but we all recognize that there are certain hazards in any workplace. Regarding spray finishing operations, these hazards that we'll cover today are due to the potential for fires and explosions, chemical exposures, and slips, trips, and falls. It is GFS's highest priority to not only provide a safe working environment for our employees, but also to deliver equipment that helps provide a safe environment for the users of our product. To achieve this, we apply various codes and standards and industry practices that have been developed to mitigate the hazards. So let's start this off with a discussion of the fire and explosion hazards. Many primers, paints, and cleaning materials are classified as flammable or combustible liquids. We've covered the different classes of flammable and combustible liquids in our videos on paint storage and use. If you've not watched that one yet, you can check it out on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel after we're done here, and if you find it useful, please give it a like. As I mentioned, codes and standards have been developed to address the hazards associated with flammable and combustible materials. These codes and standards are the International Fire Code in the United States, the National Fire Code in Canada, and NFPA 33 standard for spray application using flammable or combustible materials. GFS spray booths are designed and manufactured to meet the applicable requirements of these codes and standards. Highlights of the requirements that address the fire and explosion hazards include sufficient ventilation to keep overspray from escaping the booth and to maintain a concentration of flammable vapors in the exhaust below 25% of the lower flammable limit, construction using non-combustible or limited combustible materials, smooth interior surfaces to facilitate cleaning, electrical devices such as lights and switches that are suitable for the electrical area classification in which where they're going to be installed, bonding and grounding of not only the booth but the equipment and the personnel in order to dissipate the potential for static electricity, and also exhaust fan construction that prevents rotating parts from creating a spark. Reduction of a fuel source, for example the overspray, and minimizing any ignition sources such as sparks or static electricity will greatly reduce the risk of a fire. It's also important to note that not only do these codes and standards describe the requirements of the design and manufacture of a spray booth, but they include requirements for the installation, operation, and maintenance of the spray booth and spray application equipment that the owner or operator shall follow to ensure a safe working environment. This includes establishing procedures that ensure spray application equipment is operated and maintained per manufacturer's instructions, that spray areas are kept free of excessive accumulation of overspray, and that exhaust filters are changed and properly disposed of. Because of the potential for a fire, the spray area and exhaust systems are required to be protected by an automatic fire protection system. Often sprinkler heads or dry chemical nozzles are within that spray area and can be exposed to overspray. To ensure that the accumulation of overspray does not adversely affect the operation of the protection system, sprinkler heads or the dry chemical nozzles shall be protected by coverings of thin paper or cellulose-based material. These materials will burn away and have minimal impact on the reaction time of the protection system. It is the owner or operator's responsibility to install, inspect, and replace as necessary these coverings to ensure that the fire protection system performance is not affected. In addition to the fire hazards, these same primers, paints, and cleaning materials found in spray application processes may also be hazardous to your health, with potential exposure through contact or inhalation. At this point, I will hand this over to Jason to discuss the need for and the types of personnel protective equipment.
Thanks, Jeff. So the part I'm going to do here is talk a little bit about the actual safety equipment. Most of what I do is on the automotive side, so a lot of this stuff, I know it works in other areas, but what I can speak on intelligently is the automotive side. So I'm going to kind of stick to that. So the first thing I always like to cover is painter's safety, obviously, in a form of chemicals coming into contact with them. So there's a few easy things that every painter should be doing. Every shop owner, you need to be mindful of this stuff because it's going to keep your people healthy and safety. So at our training center, we do a lot of paint certification classes where painters come in and they get certified with the paint rep from that specific paint company. And I see a lot of newer painters coming in because the old painter got isocyanate sensitization. So A good analogy for this is think of isocyanates like mercury. So it's something that your body can absorb from the paint materials, and that stuff sort of builds up in your system until you hit sort of a tipping point where you actually become allergic to those things. And for a lot of painters, that ends their career. There can be sort of the low level would be things like a rash or itchiness. On the more severe side, you can get into chest pains, have trouble breathing, and in some cases, there's even been anaphylactic shock. So it's very important to stay safe, and it's very easy to do. So I'll jump right into it. The first thing is probably the easiest thing, but it's one of the most overlooked. I work with a lot of shops all over North America, so US and Canada, and I see a lot of painters out there not wearing suits. So a suit is going to do two things. The first, obviously, safety. That's huge and crucial. But the second is contamination. And I don't like to pick on painters. I was a painter for a long time myself. But if you're getting dirt contamination in your booth, there's a really good chance it's coming from you. So when I travel to a shop, if they're having trouble with dirt issues, I usually bring a particle meter. So that'll actually read down to 10 microns. So what's going to cause a dirt nib, that size particle. And what I'll have them do is get paint ready and go into the booth, and I go in with them. And then I'll sort of measure the area to see if there is any dirt contamination issues. And then what I'll do is I'll go up to the painter and I'll actually sort of fluff his shirt a little bit, and you'll see that number of particles spike into the hundreds. So no shirt is a clean shirt. You need to wear a paint suit, and you need to keep those things clean. So with that being said, there's a few options. Here we use a lot of 3M and SATA stuff. They're very good partners of ours, and they're close. But there are other options out there. Keep that in mind. I'm just kind of showing off what we have here and what we use. So the first is a disposable suit. So these are nice because you always get a clean, fresh suit. A lot of painters will wear these for a week or so and then throw them out and start fresh. This is a good option. The only downside is it is temporary, so it's usually a thinner material. They can rip, so be mindful of what you're doing, especially if you're kneeling down on a grate. It's easy to tear a hole. If you get a hole, get a new suit. Don't stretch that thing out. So that's a really good option. The thing I always say is make sure you buy, I always say a name brand suit, just because you know it's going to be right for your application. And what I mean by that is there's some cheaper disposable suits that are not okay to use in a painting environment. They're more of a dustless environment, but they're not okay for chemical exposure. So make sure you get one that's rated for a paint environment. A step above that, and what sort of I prefer, is a more permanent suit. These typically you'll have for months. This one in particular is SATA. But you can feel the material's quite a bit thicker. The nice thing with these, again, it's a little bit thicker of a suit, but it's not hot. And they're machine washable. So what I usually recommend to painters is once a week, take that thing home and wash it over the weekend. You always want to wash it by itself. Don't mix other clothes in with it. And you want to use a very basic, simple detergent. Don't put things like fabric softener in there, because that could actually react with paint that you're spraying the next week. So to keep that contamination down, just use a basic detergent. But that's going to cover all your skin, and that's something that's crucial to do. So moving on from suits, the next thing we get into is our hands and gloves. So you should always be wearing gloves if there's paint present. So what I mean by that is I see a lot of painters, they wear it while they're spraying, but when they're in there actually mixing their paint in the mix room, they're not wearing gloves. You absolutely need to wear gloves. So there was kind of a myth that was going around when a lot of shops were switching to water-based paint that it's so much safer, so that's less of an issue. That couldn't be further from the truth. Yes, there's less solvents in there, but there's still a lot of harmful things in paint for the human body. So make sure you're wearing gloves, and the key is on gloves, they need to be nitrile gloves. So Nitrile, nitrile gloves. You can't use regular latex gloves or exam gloves. Make sure you get a good nitrile glove. That's the only type that's going to protect you from all of those chemicals. And the nice thing is weight-wise, they're about the same as a latex glove, so it's nothing crazy. You're still going to have all your feel over the paint gun and everything else. But be sure to use nitrile gloves. A bunch of different brands in those. Again, just make sure it says nitrile on it. So above that, we're going to actually get into breathing systems. So there's a lot of stuff out there on the market, and there's different levels of safety, I would say. At the bottom of that list is going to be a half mask. So this is a basic respirator. This one's from 3M, comes in a pack like this. Please know these do have a lifespan. You can't wear one of these for a month. It's not going to continue to protect. It will tell you on there the exposure time where these are still good. And with that being said, this pack is resealable. So it's just kind of like a Ziploc bag. So whenever you're not wearing your respirator, it needs to go into that and it needs to be sealed. If you leave this in your mix room or out on the shop floor just hanging up, exposed to the open air, the next day you might as well throw it away. You've probably used up the exposure limits for that and you never know what's going to get in there. So you got to keep those clean, keep them sealed. They're great for priming, small things like that. Once you get into actually spraying paint, I would highly recommend going up to another level of safety. The reason being, again, I was a painter for a long time. We didn't have any type of fresh air system, so I used a half mask for a long time. And as you can see, I have glasses. I would notice a lot of overspray on the lenses of my glasses. So if you think of your skin, that same overspray is ending up on your skin, and your skin is going to absorb those chemicals very quickly. So just a suit and gloves isn't enough. You should have full coverage. When we talk about full coverage, there's a lot of options out there. So our next level up of safety would be a PAPR system. So these aren't necessarily ideal. And check your local regulations, make sure this is something that's safe to use. In a training center environment like we have here, a lot of times I'm wearing a PAPR system. And what that is it's a fully personal system. Everything is on a belt that you wear. So there's a battery that runs a little blower motor. There's a charcoal mask in there. So you're basically filtering the air that's in the booth and that's pumping through your protective gear. The nice thing with these there's always the rumor and painters said, I hate wearing those systems because they're hot. This system here is way cooler than a half mask. You don't have that rubber on your skin. Your face is nice and open and you get that air movement. So it actually feels a lot cooler. Again, this is a great system. I would recommend going a step above into a breathable fresh air system because you're getting clean, fresh outside air. But these are pretty good as well. And the reason we use them in a training situation is in our booth, we might have 10 or 12 painters spraying all at once. So it allows me to work around all their hoses without getting mine tangled up. I can go in and out of the booth without having to plug into fresh air. So that's why you'll see a lot of trainers and paint techs wearing them. But again, if you can tie into a fresh air system, that's going to be your safest and best option. The filters on these systems, just like a half mask, do have a shelf life. So make sure you're not overexposing these beyond what they're meant to do. Again, right in 3M's paperwork, it'll tell you how much they can handle, how often you should change them. There's also a little attachment you put on there that'll tell you if your airflow level is good or if it's time to change your filter because there's too much dirt and dust and things like that in there. So another great option to have. The highest recommended one would be a fresh air system. And again, the main reason there is we're getting full, fresh outside air. What we use at our training center is a SATA and Dan-Am system. Dan-Am has been a great partner of ours. They're right in our backyard. I know there are other systems out there. I usually only speak about what I know, and I've been using this system for about 4 or 5 years now. So I kind of stick to that. But if you have questions, reach out. We can also put you in contact with these people if you see something here specifically you want to know more about. But again, keep in mind there are other brands out there. This is just what we have here at our facility. So here we used a 3-stage filtration system from Dan-Am. That assures us that the air we get is the freshest and cleanest you could possibly have. We also have separate lines that are just for breathable air. So every painter's plugged in. In our booth, we have a separate one just for the spray air, so we make sure nobody's plugging into the wrong thing. We took an extra safety precaution here, and all the air we run, even through our spray guns, is breathable grade quality air. So if someone were to put the wrong fitting on, somebody gets confused and they plug into our spray air, they're still going to have breathable, safe air. So there's no mistakes that can be made. Another thing you'll have to do is have a CO monitor, so a carbon monoxide monitoring system. There's a few different ones out there. There's some little portable ones that actually go right inside your helmet, so you know if carbon monoxide levels get too high. What a lot of places use and what we use here is one that mounts on the wall right by our filtration system. it has a very loud alarm on it. So if we get above that threshold, the alarm will go off and we know that we need to check our air system because there's some sort of interference where we're getting carbon monoxide in there. So again, that's colorless, odorless, so without a monitoring system like that, you wouldn't know if you're being exposed to it. This system here is the SADA system, the newer one that's out. It's very good. I highly recommend these, not just because they're safe, but they're easy to clean and they're very comfortable to wear. And that was always the pushback we would get from technicians, is they would say those things are clumsy, they're uncomfortable. The belts have gotten much smaller, they're super lightweight. And for you people in hotter climates that say, I don't want to wear them because they're hot, they even have things for that now. So you shop owners out there, there's no excuses. Your people should be wearing stuff. What I'm holding here is basically an air conditioning unit for these systems. And the nice thing is there's no kind of maintenance or anything like that. It just plugs right in line. There's a little diagram that shows you how to set it up. This goes right on your belt clip with everything else, and you can adjust how cold you want that air. So very efficient, very comfortable. The other nice thing, especially in these times, with everything going on with COVID and all of that, is you don't have to worry about painters mixing up their things. They have very quick, easy ways to personalize. So there's just a little colored tab that pushes into where the bolt is on the top of that. And there's a lot of different colors, so every painter can personalize them. I do always recommend having separate lockers to make sure everybody keeps their stuff separated. And it should be in a clean, sort of paint fume-free environment. So that locker shouldn't be a vented locker that's in the mix room. Make sure that's in a separate area where they can store their stuff safely and cleanly. Again, as always, if you have questions on this stuff, reach out to us. You can reach out to SADA, reach out to 3M. Do your research. There is other companies out there. I've never heard bad things about either of these systems, so they're always a good choice. But with that being said, I'm going to turn things back over to Geoff.
All right, Jason, thank you for that information. And again, I'd like to add that there's another potential exposure hazard that can occur with spray booths that are alternately used for elevated temperature curing drying. In an elevated temperature cure, not only do you have vapors that are being released that could be hazardous to your health, but you also have the elevated temperature environment. Some spray booths can operate up to 200 degrees Fahrenheit during cure. To address these hazards, NFPA requires that spray booths be designed with certain features that deter entry during curing. This includes a door interlock switch that, when open, will take the spray booth out of cure mode. This is usually accomplished by reverting the spray booth back to the same air temperature that you had when you were doing your spraying operation. And another deterrence that we employ is that the booth is placed in cure mode. We turn the lights off. So if the lights are off, don't go in. The other hazard we wanted to cover today is those situations where you may be exposed to a fall hazard. This could occur during spraying operations of large workpieces where you can't reach the entire area to paint while your feet are on the ground, or it could occur during maintenance of areas of the spray booth that are not accessible from ground level. For painting large pieces, the use of some type of work platform is very common. These can be used to allow access to all areas that need to be painted, or just to place the painter in a ergonomically beneficial position during the spray operation. The downside, however, is that the work platform now takes the painter off the ground and potentially exposes them to a fall hazard. There are standards that address safety requirements for these types of platforms. These standards are OSHA 1910-68 and a collection of ANSI A92 standards that address aerial work platforms. These standards include requirements for vehicle-mounted work platforms, powered platforms, self-propelled platforms, and lifts. A common type of work platform used in a spray booth is the multiple access mast lift. These are typically a 3-access lift. They allow not only travel down the length and height of the booth, but also to extend out to the product or over the product, providing additional safe access to large workpieces. Some of the features to look for in raised work platforms and lifts that address the fall hazard are a handrail that encompasses the work platform, surrounds it, a self-enclosing or self-latching gate, and the safety harness attachment points. In the United States, the minimum height at which you need to provide some means of fall protection is 4 feet, and in Canada, the height is 3 meters. The other fall hazard that we would like to cover involves ladders and recent changes to the OSHA rules. It is common for spray booths to have equipment or areas that need service or inspection that can't be accessed from the ground level. To safely perform this work, you could use a temporary means such as a folding ladder, extension ladder, scissor lift, which have their own safety issues. However, in certain situations, you may want to install a permanent means of access. To accomplish this, booths can be equipped with ladders or stairs, and platforms or other working surfaces. And it's in regard to the ladders that we want to take this opportunity to cover the changes to OSHA's general industry standards. And specifically, we're going to talk about the changes to the rule that affect protection from falls from ladders. The new rule phases in a requirement for employers to utilize a ladder safety system for fixed ladders that extend more than 24 feet. The old rule was 20 feet, and the old rule allowed you the use of cages and wells, whereas the new rule now phases out their use. OSHA made this change because studies found that cages were not effective in preventing injuries due to falls from ladders. They were effective in narrowing the target point that you hit when you fell. So again, from a safety standpoint, they found them to be not very effective. The ladder safety system usually consists of a carrier, which could be a flexible cable or rigid rail track, a safety sleeve, which is the moving component that travels up and down the carrier, a lanyard, connectors, and a body harness. Based upon the new rule, GFS's standard offering in the United States is ladders without cages. We have reviewed the designs for various ladder systems, and we can provide ladders that can accommodate the loads imposed by these systems. Due to the requirements and variables for proper selection, fit-up, training, maintenance of these ladder safety components, GFS does not provide these systems, but we do recommend that you work with your local supplier of fall protection equipment to get the proper equipment that suits both your application and your employees. As we transition away from cages, a common question we've been getting is, what if the customer specifically requests a cage? Our approach has been to make them aware of the OSHA rule, and that if they install a cage, they need to review any potential interference that cage may cause with the ladder safety system that they will be using to meet the new OSHA rule. Now, there may be situations where a cage is requested on a ladder that is less than 24 feet. Technically, this is okay. As we mentioned, OSHA does not require a ladder safety system on ladders under 24 feet. So there would be no safety device that a cage could interfere with. And for those of you tuning in from Canada or watching from Canada, our experience has been that the standard still requires cages for ladders over 20 feet. And we are starting to see some jurisdictions recommend using ladder safety systems versus using a cage. We'll keep an eye out for any standard changes in Canada, and we'll work with you to make sure we offer the right solution to address the fall hazard.
Thanks for watching, everybody. As always, we appreciate the views. If you like what you saw from Geoff and I, make sure you hit the like, hit the share. We'll get these spread around, and as always, reach out to us with any questions that you have. We're always available to answer those, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, and stay safe.